You have more than 1500 what the government calls as other languages. You have 122 major languages and 22 official languages.
Interpreting just basically isn't really a thing. Like, I think it was something like, 10% of people, 10% of the companies said that they were doing it.
But it takes guts doing SCAD and ARPs. Welcome to SlatorPod again this week, your favorite language industry podcast, and welcome from Lux.
And from London.
What is Lux? I think I mentioned it before. It's the place I hide, when cases spike. No, it's just it's a place.
So you're in the mountains. Yeah.
I am in the mountains. Yes, I'm in the mountains where they speak the beautiful language of Romansh, which I'm sure I mentioned before has 50,000 native speakers. Divided across 5 dialects. And actually, when I went to Italy, what was that? This past weekend, just to northern Italy, we passed through an area that speaks another Romansh dialect than the Lux dialect, and it was very clear from even the way things were written outside. It's just it's amazing that 50,000 speakers and you got 5 dialects. So we have another great podcast today. We have the CEO and founder of Bits India, Sandeep Nulkar, on the pod today as a guest. We're going to talk to Sandeep about our massive India survey and report that we published this week. So I'm really excited.
Well, he wears very many hats, doesn't he? We'll have to do a proper rundown of all of his titles later. Yeah.
Yeah, so he runs Bits India. He's the head of a newly created crowdsourced translation platform called Vernac, and then we also have him on as the chairman of the first chairman of CITLOP, the Confederation of Interpreting, Translation, Localization Businesses in India, who really helped us with that survey and report. So busy man, and looking forward to having him on. So we also talk a bit about TransPerfect. I haven't talked about TransPerfect for a while, so they took a final step towards resolution of that endless saga. Well, which has ended about 2 years ago, but there's we picked up on a story this week that there was one final piece of the litigation puzzle that is now complete. Just a brief update on Mozilla. And then the browser Mozilla. Then you're going to tell us a bit more about the India survey we did. And we talk about job index, and then some news from our sweep service that came in around RSI. So, and on the housekeeping side, this was a really cool week for us. We did soft launch LockJobs. Why do I say soft launch? Because we haven't even done the LinkedIn post yet about it. We basically sent one email to our, what's now like 13,000 subscribers announcing the launch, and we, created a Twitter account, which I'm very happy to say LockJobs was still @LockJobs was still available. Yeah, that's great. So we got the domain, we got the Twitter account, and we soft launched, and there's 30, 40 jobs already live now. So
I think there was 31 when I checked earlier in the week, so I don't know where we're at now. But
I think it's more because there's a few more jobs coming in, like one post. I think we have a couple of Swiss companies, Apostrophe Group and Diction are recruiting now, and so go check it out. This is definitely going to grow, and we're going to spend a lot of more time and energy in providing a really good experience for the users there. So I like it. It's good to have another website.
Something else to do,
it's good to have another .com website, and it so far very few hiccups. Actually, it's quite a pleasant experience to use it. So let's get this started with TransPerfect, and we came across a headline that TransPerfect owner Phil Shaw settles legal disputes. So the man does have a few litigation wins, I guess, and battles more under his belt. So let's just rehash the story a bit for those who came to the language industry a little later than we have, I guess. So it started, the whole battle for the TransPerfect for TransPerfect as a company started in 2013, 14. Two founders weren't really on the same page anymore, and they started battling and throwing all kinds of accusation at each other. Then the court actually ruled, kind of unprecedentedly so, that the company was going to be forsold. They appointed like a custodian. The custodian's mandate was to take the company and sell it to the highest bidder. And of course, if it's your company 50-50, then you probably don't want to, it's tough that somebody else will get the company. So really extremely long story, very, very short. Eventually, Phil Shaw, one of the founders, won over a bidding consortium by his other co-founder, Liz Elting, and eventually the only company that was still in the running that was actually Lionbridge, HIG, which is Lionbridge's owner, HIG. So that happened. That resolution, the litigation ended in. But the company was awarded to Shaw in, I think, early, let me check my notes here. I think it was late 2017. Yeah, early 2018. That was the final decision there. However, there's another entity for Wordfast. So Wordfast, which is the CAT tool, TransPerfect's CAT tool, which was acquired, I don't know, a dozen years ago, maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, was actually not owned by TransPerfect, or it was owned by the founder separately.
Okay.
So that became kind of a pawn in the grander game. And I didn't know that this hadn't settled, but apparently this week they also settled that particular dispute, and Elizabeth Elting sold her part to TransPerfect, or Phil Shaw. So now Phil Shaw owns TransPerfect, the company, but also owns the CAT tool, because you want to own your own CAT tool as well, right? And
yes.
And so I didn't know that this was actually still pending, but apparently it was. So this is one of the final steps now in ending that TransPerfect ownership saga. I think that the very last remaining piece is that Phil Shaw is suing, or TransPerfect, I don't know which, whatever entity or person, somebody. They're suing Skadden Arps, which was the law firm.
Yeah.
They're suing Skadden Arps. Because they're accusing them of overbilling, because Skadden Arps was basically appointed by the custodian who was in charge of selling TransPerfect to do all the legal work, right? And managing the company in certain aspects. And Phil Shaw says, well, we have no visibility on what they actually did. They just send us their invoices. And, Skadden Arps is like one of the top tier firms. They probably charge you like $800 an hour or even more, right? So there's millions and millions of bills that just, come... you got to pay, or that were paid out of the company.
So do they now have to justify the time spent?
I don't think, I think that's still subject to that very final legal case.
Okay.
But it takes guts suing Skadden Arps. So that's, suing a law firm is probably not easy.
It's bold, It's
bold, but that's the last one. So we got Wordfast out of the way, and now this is the final piece in the ownership saga. So let's see how TransPerfect's 2020 is going to be. I mean, they do have a fair amount of clients in the travel and retail space, so they're probably going to suffer a little bit there. But I think we did an update on them a few months ago, right?
Yeah, it was Q2, I think. Mm-hmm.
Kind of flattish, I guess. But, they're also in many other areas now. So let's see there. All right, moving over to Mozilla. We had the headline that Mozilla terminates Elmo, which is its localization infrastructure backbone. Seems like to me kind of a cost-cutting, streamlining exercise. I think apparently Mozilla also had to let go of 250 people, which is like a quarter of their workforce. They closed down their Taiwan operations, and apparently decommissioning that localization backbone also saves them some money. Seems like it's streamlining localization to the extent that there's fewer review cycles involved, or rationalization generally of the entire localization workflow. They're saying they've been reducing the number, priority, and mobile products to localize. So they're more shifting towards Firefox or Android, Firefox for iOS, and the original flagship products for mobile in terms of the localization. And interestingly, actually, we wrote about them 2 years ago. I think most of the localization workforce at Mozilla is made up of volunteers. So volunteer translators, even people that volunteer their time to do, a lot of the software programming, etc. So yeah, I mean, sad. Hopefully they're going to be bouncing back. But for more info, check out our article. But also they're publishing like a regular blog post over at Mozilla about localization. So quite interesting to keep tabs on that. Right, let's move to India. Esther, tell us a bit more about the survey, the results, and what we should be asking Sandeep later on.
Yeah, well, so I'll try not to do too many spoilers because I think we will talk in detail with Sandeep. But yeah, just a bit of background. We ran a survey supported in collaboration with SitLob, who really lent us a lot of support on that as well. And it was open between sort of early August and early September. We had 52 respondents in total, some interesting findings that they were mostly sort of LSPs, small-ish LSPs, typically I think having a turnover of less than $1 million annually, and sort of 10 plus employees, although there were some larger enterprises there as well. Interesting findings. I suppose a couple of the key findings I'd say were e-learning. That emerged as the biggest demand driver for the Indian LSPs. And there were some kind of real niches within e-learning that some people kind of commented on and gave their take on why, in particular, e-learning was surging or is surging in India. For a lot of LSPs, they said that the biggest challenge biggest business challenge for them right now is sales and growth. How are they selling? How are they growing and continuing to do that? So I think as well, Sandeep had some kind of ideas and advice for people on how to run the sales operations. They should definitely buy our sales and marketing report, all Indian LSPs.
A little bit of a plug right there.
A little bit of a plug. So what else? Machine translation, some kind of interesting information coming out around that. So obviously, or unsurprisingly, I should say, LSPs identified as machine translation as the biggest external threat to the language industry. So it's no different than I think when we ran the survey of international LSPs as well. Also as the biggest industry mega trend right now. But I think something like 20% of LSPs have not even begun the process of integrating machine translation into their workflow. And generally it seems to be sort of slightly less utilised, less mature than potentially LSPs elsewhere. I think Sandeep has some views on why that might be as well. And then also, one thing that I didn't expect, I think, was the fact that the majority of LSPs said that they were using third-party translation tools, so TMS and CAT tools. Which I think in my mind I was thinking, India's great sort of software and tech hub. I kind of expected there to be a lot more proprietary tools in use among the LSPs.
I mean, you've got to be quite big. You've got to be quite big to have your proprietary tool, especially on the CAT tool side. Maybe you can develop some internal TMS, maybe ERP job file shuffling system, but like a CAT tool is a little harder to do. Yeah, I mean, look, India. I mean, I've lived in Asia for a long time, but not I skipped India. I was kind of more in the greater China area, so we should probably do something on China at some point. I would feel a little more knowledgeable. But India is so large. It's like 1.3 billion people, 23 official languages, and probably hundreds of dialects and smaller languages. It should be this gigantic localization market, like just on the face of it. So, it looks like we're still in the very early stages of this. I mean, the fact that, we got 52 responses from corporates is very encouraging. And it's kind of almost, I think it's the first of its kind in terms of a really sizable comprehensive survey. But, you do something like that in Europe, you probably get 1,000 if you put your mind to it, or in the US, right? So
yeah.
I'm going to ask Sandeep about that. Like, where are we in this adoption of localization as something you do to reach all of those different linguistic communities, and what's the growth potential, but like the realistic growth potential? Mm-hmm. So I should probably stop now because We should ask him.
Well, I mean, and also one thing that came out was that, I mean, interpreting just basically isn't really a thing.
Doesn't exist.
Like, I think it was something like, I don't know, 10% of people, 10% of the companies said that they were doing it. And most of them had like very little actual revenues from interpreting. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, move on to the job index. And again, we're going to talk about all of those things, regarding India with Sandeep. But we had the job index out this week. Where are we now? Where we're at?
Yeah, so I suppose quite a positive month overall for the job index. So it's actually crossed back over the baseline for the first time since March 2020. It dipped, obviously it fell off a cliff from March basically and hit an all-time low in July before starting to recover slightly in August, and that has continued throughout September and into October. So October is the first time it's kind of bounced back above the baseline, which I think was July. The baseline was taken to be July 2018. And we're now back at, what was the figure? 102.5. So it's around the same level now as it was in October 2018. So 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think, there's, I think the low point is definitely behind us. There's a lot of activity, as we said about, in this podcast many times, and in this industry, there's many pockets of growth and things that are really going very strongly. Of course, others not so well. I'm interested how this is going to trend over time, and if there's going to be like once this is all over, if it's just going to be a massive push again and a lot of additional hiring. Obviously, that would be. We're here with lockjobs.com. We're here for all the hiring needs, right?
All your hiring needs and your job search needs.
Your job search needs.
Because it's obviously for candidates. Yeah.
Yeah. We need to start putting this out there a little bit more, of course. Cool. So, glad this is up, and just want to mention a couple more stories that we picked up in our daily, not weekly, in our daily SlatorSweep service. So Sweep is basically a paid service that sends you an email every day because you need more emails every day. But this is really cool. This is everything that we don't cover editorially, but is still relevant to the language industry. So typically we're sending out 10, 20 additional, stories or links to third-party stories you want to read, or papers or announcements, etc. So there's two that we had, I think it was today. One is KUDO, the RSI platform, remote simultaneous interpreting platforms, that they have now an integration with Microsoft Teams. And I haven't looked into this, but basically we need to bring somebody on from the RSI space, and we have somebody confirmed for next week. Let the surprise effect linger there for a second. I think there's a bit of a race to become part of these big platforms, like to become part of their kind of offering, right? Because I guess they're not going to allow 50 different RSI solutions to work on top of their platform. So I haven't looked into KUDO's announcement if it's like an official integration with Microsoft, but if it is, kudos to them. If it's not, maybe it's kind of a first step towards that. But generally we'll be seeing a lot more of these announcements that these RSI platforms are going to become part of Zoom, Microsoft, Teams, whatever, Google maybe has their own plans. But interesting new announcement there. And then there was an M&A that you looked at briefly, Esther. What was that about?
Yeah, I did. So this was US-based Vernac Corp. They are a captioning and accessibility provider, and they announced that they had acquired Sovo Technologies, which is Canada-based company offering captioning and transcription services. So it seems to be more kind of in the access space than typically what we would cover, but sort of definitely adjacent if they're not already doing language services.
Yeah, we're expanding into that. We're going to cover this space a little bit more as well. Also with AI Media's IPO in Australia, which gave everybody a lot more information around that space. And I think these areas are merging a little bit. So language service providers and the core translation space are moving into those areas, and then some of these captioning transcription players are moving more into the translation space. So this is all blending a lot more than it used to. So we shall keep tabs on that. All right, so that's it for our part here, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to Sandeep in just 1 second. And we're back. We're back with Sandeep Nulkar, the founder and CEO of Bits Private Limited, and Vernac. Hello, Sandeep.
Hello, Florian.
Hi, Sandeep.
Hello, Esther. Hello.
Hey, where does this podcast find you, Sandeep?
Very much in Pune, probably the epicenter of the COVID pandemic now in India.
Oh wow!
But
oh my God.
doing great. Yeah. So
okay, in Pune, India. Is that? Can you just? Is it on the? For those that don't know, India is on the west or the east, the coast, in the middle.
So west, it's about 150 kilometers from Mumbai.
Okay.
So pretty much the hub of a lot of industrial activity.
Get it. All right.
So I was going to start there. Can you tell us a bit about your background, Sandeep, and how you got started in the language industry?
Well, that was honestly eons ago. So I founded Bits in 1993. I am, in terms of background, of course, I've graduated in French. So French was my major.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, great. So I did my post-graduation in international business, and I happened to do my summer internship in an automobile company, rather a two-wheeler manufacturer called Bajaj Auto. And that's honestly where that entire translation bug, so to say, bit me, because I was really never used for anything to do with international business. I was mostly translating stuff for them. So that's kind of the educational background, and also pretty much how the translation profession happened to me. So that's a little bit of the personal background.
And then how did you go on to found your own companies? And can you tell us a little bit about both Bits and Vernac and what you do, what your role is at both of them?
So Bits was honestly a very natural progression, in the sense the Indian economy opened up fairly in the early 90s, 91, 92. And I post-graduated in 1993. And that's when most major international companies were coming into India. And very few people know this, but Pune is kind of known as the Detroit of the East. We have a lot of automobile companies in Pune. We have a lot of thereby auto ancillary manufacturers in Pune. The engineering industry is extremely strong in Pune. And we also have a very good, now, of course, IT and the pharmaceutical industry. So it's a huge industrial hub. And a lot of companies will have their factories and production centers in Pune, and probably just the head office in Mumbai. So that's how the structure is. And I think if in marketing you talk about being there at the right place at the right time, I think I was born in the right year, because then I probably post-graduated in 1993, when you honestly needed to be a dud not to make it in life, because the opportunity was immense. So I think that's how really Bits started. And pretty similar is how probably Vernac started, because we could see that something is changing, in the sense, if you look at India, as a market for a billion plus people, it's honestly not a market for billion plus people. It's a merely 200 million people market, if you're talking to them in English, because more than a billion people in India do not understand English at all. They do not speak English as their first, second, or even third language. Now, which is somehow, we got the feeling a few years ago that things are going to change. We were not really sure how and what and when. But that's when we actually started exploring Indian languages and technology. And Vernac actually was a byproduct of that thought process. And I think our hypothesis kind of was right, because then Geo happened, and Geo changed the face of everything in India. Because of mobile penetration, these billion plus Indians now are the new market, and everyone's talking about how can you get the next billion on board. And that's probably the backstory, so to say of Vernac, and probably why also I think it will have a great future.
I just have a quick question there. So Geo, is
Sure.
that
Yeah.
the JIO?
Geo, Reliance Geo. That's right. Reliance
Okay.
Geo.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Can you just tell us a bit more about that? Is that like a mobile first? Like what type of service
Yeah, it's a
company is it?
mobile telephony, so they provide mobile networks and the works, as in it's a mobile telephone company.
Get
And
it. Okay.
of course, they are the reason why now smartphones are extremely cheap, why internet connections are dirt cheap, and why practically a billion plus Indians are online.
And what's your experience of running an LSP based in India and also the language technology company? And more generally, how would you describe the translation and localization industry in India?
Uh, well, I think to begin with, we need to understand that India, unlike China, is a production economy. So, sorry, a consumption economy. China is a production economy. So, if you're looking at a 1.35 billion people consuming, that's a lot of consumption, which means that your urban markets are going to saturate very, very quickly. Urban markets are not probably more than 200 or 300 million people. And then every company at some stage is faced with the question as to what next? How do we grow? And that's honestly where the entire industry is now looking, and which is why the translation and localization industry in India is really seeing this, so to say, what I would choose to call the golden era, so to say, of the industry, because now is the time when things are really beginning to happen. Every company is looking at what we call tier 2 and tier 3 cities and villages. So tier 2 and tier 3 cities are probably cities which are not your regular major cities like Pune, Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, Chennai, Calcutta, and neither are they villages. So they are somewhere in between. And that's the those tier 2, tier 3 cities and villages is where everyone says that the next boom is going to come from. And in India, we have this concept of Bharat and India. Bharat is basically the Hindi word for India. So when the industry refers to Bharat, they're actually referring to this large population of people who are unable to transact in English. So there's this Bharat versus India kind of a scenario playing out in practically every industry right now. And so we also linguistically very diverse. Now, if you look at the linguistic landscape, you have a country with over 19,500 dialects. That's a lot of dialects.
Wow.
Even if you ignore those dialects, you have more than 1,500 what the government calls as other languages. You have 122 major languages and 22 official languages. And I would say that we also have two special languages. Those special languages, I personally call them special because the literacy rate in India is high only in certain states and in major cities. Otherwise, you're dealing with a population that's largely illiterate. Uh, and thereby, what the industry now likes to believe, the future of India is voice, video, and vernacular. So, voice and video, to my mind, are those two languages that a large majority of the Indian population is going to use to transact online. And which is why that's something that really needs a lot of focus from the language industry too.
Very, very interesting. I mean, it just blows my mind when you're talking about 19,000 dialects. I mean, we're in
Mm.
Switzerland. We're so proud that we have like 20 or 25. And like, it's like, oh, each valley has its own little dialect. Oh my God, we have 20. I mean, you guys are like 19,000.
Yeah.
Oh, that just blows my mind. So that obviously is a giant potential market, but also you mentioned that with digitization, etc., you're kind of at the cusp of something very big. Is that also one of the reasons why you started SitLab? And can you just tell us a bit more? What does it stand for, and how did it kind of come about? What's your involvement in that? Because we collaborated, of course, with SitLab on our
Yes.
survey, which we're going to delve into in a second. But just a bit of the origin story of SitLab and what it means.
So Sitlob honestly was something that was conceived on the sidelines of the UATC conference, where I was invited to talk about India as the next frontier. And I think Jeffrey has been really instrumental in helping us at every stage. And then, of course, Gala chipped in, and it's really been a lot of collaborative work. The Women in Localization chapter also supported us in ways they could. So I think the primary reason of getting an association together was very simple. In India at least, this is a largely unorganized sector. It's a largely fragmented sector, and each one is doing their own thing. There's absolutely no coordination, and that is something that we primarily aim to work on. So we need to get practically all stakeholders on one platform. We need to start putting up a united front. United front not because we are fighting someone, united front because we are actually dealing with a huge opportunity here, and I don't think anyone is going to be able to do justice to this opportunity. And by opportunity, I honestly do not mean in its narrow sense of only merely money. Money, I think, is going to be a byproduct. We are actually talking about essential services. I'm talking about language as human rights. If I start talking to you in a language that you don't understand, I think that's not really truly and my idea of independence. The internet is not really truly inclusive, and all the more so in a country like India with that kind of linguistic diversity. So I think the industry needs to come together. I don't view the industry in a very myopic sense of the translation industry. I think we extend that scope to language, language technology, academics, the government. Everyone is coming on board. So it's not something that's speculative. It's already happening. And Sitlob is another effort in that direction of probably galvanizing one small part of the industry and ensuring that we are joining forces with other bodies that are working in the same direction. So I think a huge empty canvas, if you ask me,
And it stands for Confederation of.
of interpreting, translation, and localization businesses.
There you go. Got that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think it's a first. There wasn't a prior kind of pan-Indian body for the industry. Is that correct?
There is one, and it's to my mind, I think it's largely a body of freelancers, and of course, freelancers are an important part of the ecosystem. But as you have more and more companies coming up, as you have more and more companies branching into not only language but also technology, I think we needed something that represented that segment too. And I think from the kind of response we have got from within India and from outside India too, I think that stand is kind of vindicated.
So we collaborated, Slator and Sitlab, we collaborated on this Indian LSP survey, right? We got more than 50 responses, and we uploaded the article just this
Mm.
week. It's quite comprehensive. Does look quite fast, even though it's a lot of content. So my question to
Yeah.
you is, what were some of the kind of most interesting findings that you saw from the survey? And was there anything that surprised you when we actually crunched the data and put it online?
I think those were my first reactions, and I wrote to Esther saying that, I'm honestly impressed with what looked like really very simple questions that we were answering. And then you hand it over to professionals like you, and then you come up with that kind of a report. I think it was extremely impressive. So it would be really unfair on my part to pick one or two or three things. But yeah, if there was one thing that I found interesting was the perspective, and which honestly I didn't have. That was a perspective I got from the report. That 70%, 71% of the respondents, they said that Asia happens to be a major market for them, which was interesting because I thought they would probably say Europe or maybe North America, but Asia was interesting. As in, I don't know too many companies myself who work primarily with the Asian markets. So that, of course, was something that I found very interesting. Surprising. Well, I think opportunity that the fintech sector really has kind of didn't come out through what the respondent said, which was a little surprising because financial inclusion and reaching the last Indian with all kinds of financial services is also a priority for the government. And a lot of startups are actually trying to solve problems in that space. So that one aspect really for me personally that stood out as to it looked a little underplayed. I wonder why, in the sense I would have imagined more LSPs to come out and talk about the opportunities they have, as in they're bang on when they talk about e-commerce and education and all of that. But I think fintech also happens to be a very, very important segment in India right now. So,
Okay.
I think one thing that came out of it from for me as well was the fact that a lot of LSPs said that they found the aspect of sales or like business growth and sales a bit challenging. Why do you
right.
think that is in particular, and what advice do you have for LSPs in that area?
I think a lot of LSPs are very small in size. That makes it very difficult for them. I think from where they see it, it makes it very difficult for them to hire professionals, and which is one of the reasons that I have seen in the many interactions I've had with LSP owners over the last nearly 28, 29 years, that it's usually the LSP owner who's selling,
Mm-hmm.
and which is not really a bad idea when you are just probably starting off. But at some stage you really need to get in professionals who can do that job, and I think that amount of investment is something that they are unable to make. Now I personally feel that India has demonstrated a lot of ability in terms of entrepreneurship, but I also feel that that is largely how the rich and the poor think. So if you look at entrepreneurs in India, they would be very rich or very poor. Poor because they don't have a choice, so they become entrepreneurs. The middle class in India is largely a class of people who have been employed. Now if someone starts a company, they're in this very non-growth mindset, so to say. So I think the solution is very simple. You look at any company as a business, a professional activity that you have started. You have targets, you need to achieve those targets, and it needs to make financial sense. So I think at some point, Indian LSPs need to seriously start thinking of hiring the best in the industry that they can afford. And like I've also said earlier, there is a whole gamut of people available on the market. So it's not that they will always come costly. If you have a budget, I'm pretty sure India has enough people to give you someone you can afford. But I think that is one step, one single step, that my personal advice would be to actually invest in professional salespeople. So having a sales team is extremely important.
Mm. And then what about the aspect, I mean, maybe moving away from business growth completely, but thinking about technology and machine translation,
Mhm.
what can you tell us about how machine translation is being used by LSPs in India or not? And is there anything that you think is holding LSPs back from using it more?
So, firstly, the history of machine translations in India is not very recent. So, we go back a long time. So, in India, the government actually started investing in machine translation technology as early as the late 80s. And even today, the government has rolled out certain machine translation programs in Indian languages. So, it's a organization called CDAC, and CDAC has come out with a translation engine in a few Indian languages that is currently being used in the Indian Parliament. So there is a history. So it's not like normally what happens is the private sector is very quick to adopt, but the government lags behind. Here, actually, the government has shown a lot of initiative. When you look at the industry, especially the translation industry adopting machine translations, I think it is a money issue. It is definitely a money issue because I've also gone on record, not only for you, but I've gone on record to say that it's really criminal to expect someone to pay dollar prices and then earn rupee rates after you've invested dollar prices in customizing your own MT engines, because you need to go language specific, you need to go domain specific, and that's already too costly. So anyone who doesn't have that kind of money is probably, their idea of machine translation is going to be limited to a Google Translate or a DeepL or a Bing or what have you. The more mature ones do definitely get into this. I know quite a few companies who have invested in that technology. We ourselves have an engine that we have built, custom built for English, Hindi, and we need plan to have that for other languages as well. But by far that is limited. I although see this changing over time. I definitely see this changing over time, because I also see a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening within India. I'm not even talking about people coming from outside. I'm just talking about people regrouping and becoming bigger than what they are right now. And that should add some amount of money power.
And I know we'd spoken a bit about translation technologies and the I guess more established for the
Yeah.
language industry, CAT tools, TMS, and it emerged from the survey that really most people are using third-party tools. There are some who use a mix of third-party and proprietary, but by and large, people are not really building their own proprietary language or translation technology in-house. I mean, does that tie with what you've observed in the industry, and why, again, is this a money question, or why is this happening?
It's always going to be a money question in India. To begin with, everything is a money question, because prices, it's a price sensitive market. You like it or not, it's a price sensitive market. But I think here, in addition to money, unlike last couple of things we spoke about, I think here it's also a question of organizational maturity. So sometimes you are faced with that build or buy decision. And it's not an easy decision to make. As in, you need to vet things, you need to understand technology to be even able to vet technology. So technological expertise or the lack of it could also be one of the reasons why people are very quick to latch on to what's available rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. Because we have gone through that entire process. For 10 years we used our own proprietary tool, and I know that it took the last bit of intelligence out of me speaking to the IT guys to even explain what I want, and then to actually see whether what they have made is what was exactly ordered. Then you have UAT testing, you have so many things. It's a complex process. So I think it's a organizational maturity question too. And some people do it by choice, as in they like we moved from our own tool to tool that we picked up from one of at one of the conferences, and then we started that conversation and we moved to that because I think it made sense to us at a time when we were investing in a new company. We didn't want to save money anymore. We actually wanted our investments to earn us money rather than just save them. So I think there are considerations. So it's, I think, a little bit of a lot of reasons. But technology in general in India is not something that people are averse to. As people, we are very open to technology. Even something like CAT tools is used very rampantly in India. Of course, there are those initial times when people resist any change, but barring that, I think that's adopted pretty well in India. CRMs are pretty well adopted in India too. In fact, we have one of our members. They have come out with their own proprietary CAT tool. So a lot of people are, and I think it's number 4 on the
Is that
list of
Rian?
tools. Rian, that's right. So I think, yeah.
No, very, very interesting. I have a follow-up question maybe on the market, moving away from the tech side and TMS, CAT, etc. But to the kind of the market composition, what I would have expected more from the survey would have been more subcontracting, but it seems like subcontracting between LSPs or being a subcontractor from some bigger MLVs is not a huge thing, but mostly it's kind of a domestic market, at least from the companies that we've surveyed. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the composition of the market? Who are kind of the end clients, and maybe, yeah, why isn't there more subcontracting? If that was, at least for me, that was the expectation going into this, but it seems like it's a lot more end clients.
I have seen that direct clients are a lot more approachable in India than they are in Western countries. As in, if you just need to get into, say, an Accenture in France, I don't even know where to begin. So you're basically prospecting in weird ways. I don't know, probably LinkedIn, this and that. In India, people reach out to you. So you need to understand how India is used by these very companies to probably deprive European LSPs of revenue. So I'm not going to actually name any brands here, but a very popular car manufacturer uh, pays European LSPs anywhere between 10 and 15 cents a word. That same car manufacturer comes to Pune and then haggles with us for a price which was €1 per word. Now, the reason they're actually carrying out this entire activity in India is because they want it done at that price. Because even their car in India costs a fraction of what it costs in Europe. So I think international customers will probably never work with their language service companies in their home country, especially if they have offices in India, because it makes great logic to translate documents and content here. And what they can afford here, they probably don't need to do that back home. So the way it works here at times is that I want a price, and I know what price I want. If you lack the expertise, they will actually have a technical person from their side add value to whatever you're doing and still end up being way cheaper. Because if you're comparing 1 or 1.5 cent to even 10 cents, there's honestly no comparison.
Yeah.
So
True.
I think that's one of the reasons that, and the list is endless. As in, the reverse question is just guess who's not in India. Everyone is in India. If everyone is in India, all translation companies, irrespective of their size, will find someone to work with. Now, that really robs me of any impetus to work with someone who's going to probably pay me 50% lower just because you got a project. So I would rather just have a few projects but be paid those rates than have 10 projects and be paid half the price for half the projects. So I think that it makes a lot of sense to me, as in that didn't surprise me in the least. Uh, it's not a done thing. The other reason is also very strange, but LSPs normally are very wary of each other. As in, normally I would probably be expect to be paid well, but when I want to pay someone else, just because it's an LSP, I will probably not pay exactly on time. And there are a lot of issues, even in the association. That's one of the topics that always invariably comes up. That as an association, can we not really have some kind of regulation around this, where there is at least some reason why companies now want to pay on time. LSPs working with LSPs. So that those could be a couple of reasons.
Okay, and let's talk about one of the main demand drivers in India. I mean, I think emerging from the survey as top of the list was e-learning. So, what are
Right.
your thoughts on e-learning as a demand driver in India?
So here are some numbers that you could probably find interesting. Maybe already you know them already. So more than 65% of India's population, which is a cool 850 million people, are less than 35 years of age.
Wow.
And when you're not even 35, you're either learning or you're skilling. So just guess the opportunity. Now, there are reports that will tell you that this segment has been growing at over 40% CAGR, that's compounded annual growth. And it's expected to reach about 2 billion, the value of the industry, by 2021. So it's a huge opportunity, as in the number of startups in this space are mind-boggling. And it's not only ed tech, but it's also core education. So you don't even need to be a education technology company, you can just simply be an education company. As in, we work with a few. They have absolutely no connection with any kind of technology, but they are just putting out content for a certain segment, and they need to do that in a few Indian languages. So I think that market really, really has potential. And what comes close, or rather, it's something even bigger than that, is only e-commerce.
Yeah, we're actually going to ask you about e-commerce as well. I mean, that's with Geo and all these other. I mean, that's what I've been perceiving from the outside. That like the huge e-commerce opportunity in India in terms of localization. Maybe just share a few thoughts on that.
So e-commerce, again, if you look at the numbers, they're mind-boggling. As in, you currently have more than 20,000 e-commerce companies in India. That's not a small number by any stroke of imagination, because these include small and big ones. Probably there are undocumented ones too. You have more than 700 million internet users currently, with an internet, so e-commerce penetration of 75%, which means of your 700 million users, online people, you have 75% of them actually shopping online. Again, that's a very huge number. And this industry itself is slated to touch $100 billion by 2021. So, and again, like we spoke earlier, this can't really be limited to Pune, Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, Chennai, Calcutta. It has to move to tier 2, tier 3 cities. In fact, there was an article just last week that said that in the upcoming festive season of Diwali, Bharat is going to generate more revenue than India. So, and Bharat doesn't understand English. Bharat will stare back at you blankly. So, you actually need to go that extra mile. And which is why, very quickly, someone like Amazon comes into India, and one of the first things they do is probably start investing in their own translation technology, because
I
they
think
can't
they've
afford it.
been
I think.
Amazon's been very active in developing like technology, especially like voice to or like speech to speech, and like generally just ramping up Indian
Absolutely.
language coverage there. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's the need of the hour, and rightfully so, because if they are global corporations, they are global corporations for a reason. They have this vision of a localized strategy, and I think that really says a lot about how one is expected to speak to end users, no matter which country you're in.
So that's a very exciting, scenario you're painting there over the next few years. So what's your vision, and what are you trying to achieve with Sitlop in the next, 1, 2, 3 years? What are some of the projects you're looking at?
I think the first and foremost, what our focus is on is to increase membership. So
Mm-hmm.
we want every single company to be on board, irrespective of their size. Uh, Percentage of business coming from translation or interpreting doesn't matter. We just want them to come on board to begin with. Uh, the secondary objective, which also is something that we're already working on, is to partner with government bodies, with industry bodies, and basically to bring all stakeholders on one single platform, because that's where the dialogue starts. That's where you start making sense to each other, because otherwise everyone's doing their own thing. And I'll just give you an example. So as part of the industry, apex industry body in India, FICCI ILIA now, uh, we have an initiative going for universal acceptance. Universal acceptance actually allows me to send you an email using nothing of English.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an India initiative, it's a global initiative. Now, without actually having a UA compliant application, you're getting nowhere in India in the next few years, because a lot of people will come online. They will need to interact with your applications. Some of them can't even type, they will use voice. Some of them can type, but they can type only in their language. So your systems need to actually have that kind of technology integrated to be able to service those kind of people. Now that's where you can't just be a translation service provider, or you can't really represent only translation service providers. You need to get technology people on the same platform, the language industry on the same platform, and that's probably, and of course, not to forget the government, and without the government, nothing really will move forward. So I think all of them really need to come together, and I think it's a wonderful time in India. I haven't seen a government so focused on language and language technology. Uh, so I think they have a very clear vision on what they want to achieve, and I can see very, very tangible progress every other month in that direction. So
Wow, that's a
yeah,
positive message. We need to leave it there.
yeah,
Well, thanks so much for doing this, Sandeep. And for anybody, I'll encourage them to head to our website and read the report. It's really comprehensive, and of course, make sure to
yeah,
get in touch with Sandeep for if there's anything you can do with SitLab.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And
excellent.
I think more importantly, we want to be there for anyone coming into India, to support them and to see how we can help them. So that is also one of the roles that we see for ourselves, because there could be loads of companies out there, and I have met quite a few who don't mind coming to India, but they're just a little scared. They're scared as they don't know who to trust, they don't know where to start, and that's exactly something that we can facilitate.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that is a challenge. So it's great that you're doing this. Well,
yeah.
thanks so much.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
so
much for
much.
doing this.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Sandeep.
Thank
All right.
you, both
Take
of you.
care.